Hello guys, welcome to this video. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do front-end validation with the help of JavaScript and jQuery. Okay, let me open the code. Right, so this is register.js. Okay, so initially have binded the roles to the drop down. So if you see the drop down, we have two roles. I'm pulling this data from the backend, from the database. Okay, so this is what I showed you in one of the videos, right? So I'll add that video in the description. So in this video, I'm going to write a function called check validation. Okay, so this application is a parking management system that I have developed as an entire series, both front end and back end. Okay, so I have separate playlist in my channel. If you want to see the entire application development, you can watch all the playlists and also try to implement the same, and that will help you to understand both front end as well as the back end. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have a variable called isValidated. Okay, so isValidated is a boolean variable which is going to be false, right? So initially it is going to be false, and what I am going to do here is I'm going to copy this thing. Okay, code 6 lines of code and put it here. Okay, so I'm not going to have last name as required field. Okay, so guys, here I have not kept any star symbol to show which is the required field for users. Okay, so if you want to add that, you can have a span and keep that color as red. Okay, and have a star text in it, right? So here I'm going to have if, okay, the first thing I'm going to validate is first name, right? So this line, I think you know already. This is the ID of first name element. So when I go to inspect element and check the ID, right? So this is the ID of this first name element. So ID is nothing but naming the control. That's it. So if you name a control with the ID, right, it is easy for you to call when you write a jQuery or JavaScript code, right? So it is nothing but keeping a name for a control and calling that from your application. That's it. So right, so I'm going to assign that ID DOM element to this variable first name. Okay, as well as mobile, similarly password, confirm password, and DDL roles. So when I go to the application and check this element, you see input password is ID of password element. Okay, so similarly input mobile, input password, confirm, DDL role. Understood? Fine. So the first field I'm going to validate is first name. So first name dot val will give us the current value of this text box. So when user types something, this is the current value of this text box, and it may change when user enters different inputs, right? So we are going to get the current input given by the user with the help of val, right? And we are going to say trim. Trim is nothing but trim is nothing but trimming the white space, because if someone gives a value like this, okay, so if we don't trim this control, it will take this space also along with the data. Okay, so logically this does not have any data, but if we don't trim this, it will have space, and space is nothing but null, right? But the application will take this as a value. Okay, so trim dot length, we are going to check the length. Length is nothing but if the control really has some value. Okay, if it is 0, we are going to send some, not sending some message, we are going to set a border for that control. Okay, I'll show you how. So the next thing is So I'll do the same for the remaining 4 elements, guys, right? Yeah, yes, guys, have returned the same for other fields also. Okay, for the role, for this drop down control alone, it is going to be different, right? So we are going to validate whether the this drop down contains the value select. Okay, if this is selected, it means it does not have any value, it is having a null value. Okay, so we have to validate that. So to validate that, we have to say whether the ddl role.val is equal to this, right? So we have to copy this from DOM. So when we say inspect, okay, so we have to copy this and paste it here, right? So when all the fields are empty, what I'm going to do is ddl, sorry, first name dot css, and we are going to apply css from the JavaScript, okay, from the help of jQuery. Sorry, it is going to be 1px solid red. Okay, so I'm going to do a similar thing for the other fields also. Okay, so to copy this line, we have to press shift alt down in Windows. Okay, so to copy the number of times we want. Okay, mobile password, confirm password, ddl role, right? Else, if all the controls contains value, okay, if all the controls contains value like this, okay, so what we have to do is we have to remove the border. Okay, right? So what I'll do, I'll copy this and paste it here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this border. Okay, 1px solid red. So press Ctrl D, it will select all the related text, right? The same text, and when I say backspace, it will remove all the occurrences at one go. Okay, so I'm saving it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call this function from a button click event. So the button is going to be create account, right? So I'm going to copy this btn create. Okay, so as I already said, the id is nothing but naming an element, okay, with a name, and it helps us to call that element from our code easily. Click function. Okay, so here I'm going to call check validation, right? Perfect. So I'm going to test this now. When I click on create account, let's see what happens. See, all these fields shows a red border, okay, because it does not have a value in it. We didn't apply validation for this last name control as it is not required, so the validation is not applied for this control alone. I hope you understood, right? So now when I enter some value to some fields and click on create account, so here if you see, these controls have values, but the validation did not work. So the validation works only when all the controls contain some value. So when I click on create account, see, the validation is removed on all the controls because we wrote validation in that way only. Okay, so if all the validation does not have value, we are assigning border to all the controls, else we are removing the border. Okay, so what we have to do when we have to write validation for each control. Okay, so what we have to do, we have to repeat this validation for each controls. Okay, so first I'll write a if, and here I'm going to have first name. If first name dot trim dot value dot length equal to 0, it is going to have what, this validation. Okay, else it is going to, we have to remove the border. Okay, so let us check this, test this once. So again I'm going to fill all the values. Okay, so now the validation that did not occur for all the controls. So what happens when I remove the data of the first name control? See, since the first name does not have any values, even though the other controls had values, it is applying the border because we have written an or condition. If any one of this is true, it applies CSS for all the controls. So this is how it is working. But when I enter this value and click on create account, you see the validation is removed because our condition is working. Okay, but this is not a right case. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to write validations for the remaining controls also. Okay, we can remove this, right? So I'll save it now. We'll go back to our page. When I click on create account, it shows validation. When I enter value for the first name alone, see the validation for the first name control alone is gone, right? So when I enter mobile, the validation for mobile alone is gone. And when I enter password, this alone is gone. When I enter confirm password, this alone is gone, right? So finally, we are done with the validation of each control, right? So here I'm going to do one more thing, is I'm going to return set is validated value. Okay, so whenever it fails, we are going to set is validated to false, and whenever it passes the validation, we are going to set is validated to true. Similarly for other controls also. Perfect. Yeah. So now what we are going to do is we are going to validate the password and confirm password field. Okay. So when this password and confirm password fields are not same, we have to show validation that it is not same, right, to the user. So this is a separate validation. So for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this if condition. How I'm going to rewrite is I'm going to copy this if, okay, sorry, cut it, paste it here. This is going to be else if. I'm going to remove this else, and I'm going to have one more else if case. Okay, else if, yeah, one more else if case. So here I'm going to what, compare the fields. Okay, so password dot val, right? So we have already checked the two fields are not empty. Okay, val dot trim dot length. Here we are going to check whether the two fields are same, the values entered in the two fields are same. Confirm password dot val, okay, is not same. What we are going to do here is we are going to set the border for two controls. Yeah, two controls, and this validated is going to be false. Else, what we are going to do, we are going to remove the borders of all the controls. Okay. Yeah, we have removed it. So now I go here, and so what I do, I check, I enter the wrong password and click on create account. Okay. So I enter value for other fields and click on create account. You see, the validation is still working. The values are wrong, so it applies the red border to the both controls. So now when I enter the correct value and I click on create account, see, the validation is removed. Guys, if you see here, you have a message set below this control. Password and confirm password did not match, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide this text initially, and whenever the validation fails, I'm going to show this message, else we are going to hide it, right? So I'm going to inspect this element and capture the ID of this element. So it is having an ID called password help. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hide it on the page load. So whenever the application page loads, right, so we are going to hide it, help dot hide. Okay, so I save this. So this time you see this message is hidden now, right? It is made hidden. So whenever the condition fails, so where the condition is fail, so where the condition will fail is here. So whenever the condition fails, I'm going to copy this code. Copy this code. Okay, and paste it here. So I'm going to keep that code here and say show, right? So whenever the validation is fails, I mean the password and confirm password are not same, we're going to show this message, and whenever validation pass, right, we are going to hide that message. So this time you see I enter a wrong value again. Okay, so you see I enter Sangmesh 123, but here Narain 123. So when I click on create account, you see the validation is working, and we see a message password and confirm password did not match. So when I change this value to password, okay, when I click on create account, you watch closely guys, this border will get removed as well as this message will be hidden again, right? When I click on create account, you see the validation is perfect, it is working fine, right? So this is how we do a validation in the front end. So I'm going to tell you one more thing, why do we have this validated true and false here. Okay, so we have a variable called as validate, a boolean variable to false initially, and we are going to return that variable at the end, which means this function returns a boolean value, right? So whenever I'm going to show you here guys, so variable bool val equal to, okay, so I'm going to say alert bool val. Okay, sorry. So when I click on create account now, you'll see false, because why? The validation is failing here. Okay, so what we are doing here is we are calling this function, and this function is returning a boolean value. So how we are setting the boolean value is whenever the condition fails, the validation fails, we are setting what? A boolean to false, this boolean variable to false, and whenever the condition pass, whenever the validation is true, okay, we are setting the variable to true, right? And in each case, if you see, we are setting is validated to false and is validated to true, right? And finally we are returning this boolean variable. Okay, so we all know whenever we call a function that returns some value, that value will be returned at the place where we call this function, right? So this is the place where we call this function, and this function will return either true or false. We are storing that to a variable, and I am sending a alert of that variable, right? So this time when I enter some value, you see, so now all the validation is passed, right? So when I click on create account, you will see true, right? Because what, the function will return true. Okay, so why do we have this variable is, so consider this is a registration form, right? So I'll remove all this code. So this is a registration form. We should allow the user to save all these values to the database only when the validation is true. Okay, only when he enters the data to all the fields. Okay, so when the user enters the data to all the fields, the function will return true, else the function will return false. So what we are going to do here is we will insert the data. Okay, so we'll check if check validation is equal to true. When it is true, okay, then we will write insert to the database code. Else what, we will show the user some message here, right? So please fill all the fields, please fill all the required fields, something like that, when the validation is failed. But when the validation is true, we will insert, will take all these data, okay, and pass that to a API and insert the data to the database. Okay, so to have this kind of check, we have a boolean variable here which will return false or true based on the validation function, based on the validation, right? So this is how we have to write validations in the front end, right? So this is how it works, guys. I hope this video would have helped you in learning how to do front-end validation in a HTML page with the help of jQuery, right? So I will meet you with another interesting topic. We'll see in the next video, guys. Thank you. Bye.